Pablo, good to see you. How you doing? How you been? Joe, good to see you as well. How you doing? Evening. How was your day today? It was okay. It was good. How's your day, Joe? Comatose, good to see you as well. How you doing? How you been? Just pinning the live. There we go. Okay. The markets also took a dump today. Quite a bad one, but it's still recover. It's not major. I'm also going into the weekend. Typically, the weekend market doesn't do too well. We come back and essentially Sunday night towards Monday morning, the market starts picking up again. Hello, Miles. Hope you're well. T, good to see you as well. How you doing? How you been? Okay. By the time everyone tunes in one by one, let's do intro, disclaimer, what we're going to go through essentially on tonight's live. Morning, Miles of CMF. Shelly, good to see you as well. Morning. How you doing, Shelly? Now, welcome to the CMF Live. If you're watching this for the first time ever, the CMF stands for Crypto House Family. My name is Miles. You can tune into this live Monday to Friday, 10 p.m. London time onwards for the most recent news regarding cryptocurrency, CBDCs, AI, politics, regulations, pretty much vital information for you to know about regarding the world completely transforming into a digital space. We also do Q&As on this live as well, which means if you have any questions, put it down in the comment section. More than happy to help you out. And the disclaimer of this live, as always, is not financial advice, not political advice, and whatever I say is only for entertainment purposes. So welcome to episode 397 of the CMF Live. By the way, thank you so much to everybody from the CMF who has already liked and retweeted this live if you're watching this on X, and thanks so much to everyone who's also liked the live if you're watching this on YouTube. And if you haven't, CMF members, take 2 to 3 seconds just to like and essentially retweet this live show. Now, let's go inside the comment section before we go through the news on tonight's live. And the first news we are going to be covering is regarding the US deal and the China deal, because it is a massive, essentially, deal for the entire crypto space and the stock market, to be fairly honest. But before we talk about that and the liquidations that happened today, let's go inside the comment section first. Let's see what's happening there. Actually, I had a very boring day. Okay, Joe. Hope tomorrow's better. What's up, Miles? What's up, CMF? Kerry, good to see you. How you doing, brother? How you been? Hi, Miles and CMF. Autistic, good to see you. How you doing? Abram, hi, Miles and CMF. Good to see you as well. How you doing? How you been? Evening, Professor Miles and the rest of the team. Let's go, Funky brother. Good to see you as well. How you doing? Good evening, Miles. Hope you're well again. And hi to everyone in the CMF. Adi, good to see you as well. How you doing, Adi? How you been? Okay. Let's go for the first news on tonight's live. By that time, everyone should be tuned in. And the first news is regarding the US and China deal. So Trump did finally have a sit down, essentially, with Xi Jinping, with Xi, essentially. We're going to go through what was discussed, essentially, and what could we be expecting from this deal. And is November 1st no longer going to be tariff day for China? So the deal between the US and China is undoing damage from a self-inflicted trade war, essentially. Port fees will go away, but only for 1 year. The port fees that essentially Trump's administration decided to do last minute, that's going to go away. And Beijing essentially is again buying US soybeans after it had abruptly cut off American farmers. After months essentially of posturing and arguing and threatening, US President Donald Trump and Chinese leader essentially Xi Jinping have essentially turned back the clocks, while the meeting between the two leaders was hailed by Trump as a roaring success. The agreement that came out, it may essentially only serve to undo some of the damage. Essentially what they're trying to say is what Trump inflicted, but Trump needed to do this essentially because China was controlling quite a bit. Not that the US isn't either, but China was doing it too often. Trump inflicted essentially on his trades war upon his return to the White House. Three-digit tariffs off the table, or completely off the table, but import duties on each other higher than essentially in January. Rare earth materials will also flow more smoothly between the US and China, but China has to put in place an export permitting regime essentially that can tighten or loosen as need. It is hard to see what major gains the US has made in the bilateral relationship, essentially relative to where things stood before Trump took office, is what they're trying to say. Essentially, this was said by the economist Cornell University. On the Senate floor, minority leader essentially Chuck Schumer essentially denounced the deal out of South Korea as leaving the US as no better off. The Democrats are mocking Trump regarding the China sit-down situation. But to be fair, the Democrats never stood with Trump or the American citizens. To be fairly honest, if they did, they would vote so we can open the government from this whole shutdown situation. If anything, essentially things are worse. Prices have gone up, and China has agreed to nothing of substance that will essentially improve trade between our nations. And a Democrat senator said, adding that Trump started a trade war, created a giant mess for businesses. That's only because other countries were tariffing the US when the US wasn't tariffing them back. Trump just made the even playing field, and the other countries didn't like it. Consumers and soybean farmers, and then he celebrates for trying to clean up the very mess he created in the first place. Again, Democrats are not happy with Trump. Nonetheless, the deal has injected a degree of stability, giving the world's two largest economies, as well as the rest of the world, time and essentially room to adjust. Washington and Beijing still need to finalize their agreements, a process that always has the potential of for essentially fresh disputes between China and the US. But for now, Xi Jinping essentially appears interested in moving past the latest tensions between them. In the official statement from essentially Xi, referred to recent twists and turns that offered some lessons for both sides. He said they should be focusing on the benefits of cooperation rather than essentially falling into a vicious cycle of mutual retaliation. Both sides reduced tariffs, resumed soybean sales to China. Trump fired essentially the first shot in the trade war in February when he imposed an additional 10% tariff on Chinese goods over the allegations that Beijing failed to stem essentially the flow of the chemicals used to make the fentanyl. That soared to as much as 145% after China retaliated, but Trump essentially walked back it following the market meltdowns. The two sides in May slashed their massive tariffs to 10% on each other, while Washington retained the 20% fentanyl-related tariffs on China and its essentially retaliation tariffs of 10% or 15% on U.S. farming goods. Now, Trump essentially said he has removed one essentially 10% fentanyl tariff in exchange for Beijing's cooperation in fighting the illicit drug essentially activities in the U.S. The U.S. Secretary of Agriculture, Brooke Rollins, said China would also withdraw the retaliation tariffs on the U.S., which is great. Agriculture products, a spokesperson for the Chinese Ministry essentially of Commerce, said Beijing would adjust accordingly its essentially countermeasures without giving any sort of details. In addition, China has also agreed to buy 12 million metric tons of U.S. beans through January and will buy at least 25 million metric tons annually for the next 3 years. Treasury Secretary Scott Benson said essentially on Thursday, Fox Business Network's Morning with Maria, that compares to China buying 17 million essentially metric tons of U.S. soybeans for the first 8 months of the year, but importing zero in September 2024. China brought 22 million metric tons of U.S. soybeans, according to state media. Although China essentially did not confirm the details of the latest soybean deals, the spokesperson for the Chinese Commerce Ministry said that the two sides have reached consensus to expand agriculture between these two nations also. In April, China essentially used its monopoly power in the processing of critical minerals to essentially institute a permitting requirement for the exports of several rare earth materials. Now, rare earth materials are an absolute massive deal right now, and China has too much and needs to share, essentially. On October 9th, Beijing essentially expanded the export rules, apparently in response to the U.S. decisions to extend the export controls to businesses affiliated with already blacklisted foreign companies. Furious, Trump essentially threatened to impose a new, essentially 100% tariff on China, but the two sides managed to cool down in time for Trump to meet Xi Jinping, essentially in South Korea. Beijing essentially said it would pause for a year regarding the essentially rare earth export rules from October to conduct research to refine specific plans, while the U.S. will suspend its affiliate rules for essentially 1 year. The the delay essentially by Beijing provides just enough time for the United States to accelerate investment in capabilities and innovation for rare earths and permanent essentially magnets, said essentially Wade, the president of the US Permanent Magnet Company, AML. This needs to be on the rap speed and at scale never seen before since COVID-19 essentially. Another fresh thorn was the US introduction of port fees in October targeting Chinese-linked vessels as a part of the plan to restore America's shipbuilding capabilities. Beijing answered with countermeasures against the US. The port fees on each other and essentially removed, but essentially suspended for 1 year, the Chinese Communist Ministry said. So far, it seems to be going smoothly. Everything is being lifted. The future is still uncertain whether Trump accepts a return to the status quo, pushes to address fundamental essentially issues that have persisted for years between the US and China remains essentially unclear. Nothing about Thursday's meeting, the first between Trump and Xi Jinping in 6 years, affects Chinese manufacturing dominance that Trump has blamed for loss of American blue-collar jobs. But it is true. A lot of Americans did lose jobs, and a lot of other people lost jobs, essentially the Western side, because companies were, hiring foreign essentially employees works that Americans could have done. Now, Sean essentially Stein, the president of the US-China Business Council, called the latest developments very encouraging and added, "We hope that the future negotiations will address the long-standing market essentially access barriers, help level the playing fields for the US companies, and bring long-term predictability to the bilateral essentially trade relationships. There are more opportunities on the horizon to keep working on these challenges." Trump said he will go to China in April, and essentially Xi will visit the essentially US after that as well. That's great. If Trump isn't successful, this period could be remembered for a lot of sound and fury, essentially, but no change in the basic trajectory of China's ascendant economy. Generally, Trump grows impatient with anything beyond the immediate, and it is the Chinese that play for longer-term advantage, said Kurt, a former Deputy Secretary of State in the Biden administration and now chairman of the Asia Group. So, between these two essentially nations, between China and the US, regarding this whole deal situation, it's actually went pretty damn smooth. The only people that are criticizing it is, of course, Democrats, because they criticize everything Trump does. Trump could essentially cure cancer, AIDS, HIV, any disease in the world, and the Democrats will still call him Satan. So that one's a given. On the other side, regarding the essentially Trump sit down with China sit down, it needed to happen. It's finally happened. It's actually went pretty damn well. Things start going even more smooth between these two powerhouses. The markets will restore themselves even better. But again, we still need to come out of this government shutdown situation because now it's just getting absolutely ridiculous. And it is, again, up to the Democrats. All we need is about 5 to 6 votes to pretty much come out of this whole Democratic government shutdown situation. Now, today, the markets took a very sharp dump. Also, Bitcoin ETFs experienced significant $93 million essentially outflows. AMD market shifts. The US spot Bitcoin ETFs experienced a significant outflow of $93 million, reflecting a rising, essentially, sell pressure among institutional investors. This shift suggests cautious sentiment in the market, potentially affecting Bitcoin's price dynamics and influencing related cryptocurrencies. US spot Bitcoin ETFs experienced a net outflow, essentially, of $93 million yesterday, indicating a significant shift in institutional investments today. The sell pressure is evident amidst the growing concerns about the market stability investment strategies. Key players also involved in the scenario include major ETF issuers such as BlackRock, Fidelity, ARK Invest, and Grayscale. However, leadership essentially from these entities has not yet commented publicly on this situation. Glassnode essentially reports confirm shifting trends from ETFs turning to positive, but trade volumes showing constrained engagement. And that is an interesting factor. So according to Glassnode's essentially reports, the interest is there for essentially crypto ETFs. The interest is there for institutions getting more involved inside of crypto companies, banks getting more involved inside the crypto companies, or inside the crypto space in general, governments getting more involved, Wall Street wants to get more involved, and Glassnode is coming out and saying the interest is there, but ironically the volume isn't, and that's odd, because it's manipulation. The interest is there, but the volume it isn't. And you got to think, essentially, in a time of a government shutdown, if we come out of a government shutdown, we're going to go straight towards the Clarity Act, which is being discussed during a government shutdown. And then we're going to go straight into a multitude of ETFs. which their entire client base of Fidelity, Franklin Templeton, I mean, the list goes on, Grayscale, are all waiting for those ETFs. That's why those companies filed for them. So right now, they're completely manipulating the market space because they can, because they want to make everybody think it's game over, everybody go home, sell your positions and call it a day. But the reality of it is, we come out of a government shutdown. It's Clarity Act, which means it brings clarity for the entire crypto space. The CFTC knows what they're doing inside the crypto space. The SEC knows what they're doing inside the crypto space. We have essentially Ripple, Circle, Paxos applying for bank charter licensings. We have a multitude of ETFs also lined up coming out of a government shutdown. So it's going to be absolutely an incredible ride, pretty much after a government shutdown. But during this government shutdown, regarding Glassnode's report of interest is still there, but the volume isn't, is another way of saying manipulation is right there. The financial landscape has been impacted as Bitcoin ETF market recorded massive outflows. Although on-chain activity such as active addresses is muted, some buyers maintain essentially positions suggesting smart accumulation. The regulatory essentially environment remains unchanged, with no new updates from the SEC or other financial authorities because they're understaffed due to the government shutdown. Historically, major ETF outflows result in temporary volatility for large cap cryptos. As Glassnode essentially reports, some indicators show market stabilization with recovery in essentially the RSI and other metrics suggesting easing sell pressure. Markets remain cautious, but several indicators show stabilization beneath the essentially surface. The RSI has rebounded sharply from oversold conditions, while significant improvements in both spot CBD and essentially petroleum contracts reflects easing sell pressures and essentially early returns of the buy side interest, said from Glassnode essentially Insights reports, their official essentially blog on the market space. They are really trying to frustrate the hell out of everyone inside the crypto space right before essentially a Clarity Act, a multitude of ETFs, and everything else is on the table regarding banking charter licensing. There's so much positivity that's going to be heading towards the crypto space. It's just we're stuck in a period of complete manipulation to create frustration to make people jump out right before everything takes off. And you heard it essentially from Grayscale a long time ago. You heard it also from Standard Chartered Bank, and you heard it from Citi, that this is a completely different ballgame compared to whatever everyone else has experienced inside the crypto space regarding cycles we've had, because we're not on any of these cycles anymore. We're in a stage of regulations, institutions, governments, and manipulation right before the regulations. Before we go through the next news on tonight's live, which is regarding Nord Bank, let's go inside the comment section first. Let's see what's happening there, and then we'll go straight into the next news. Let's see what's going on. Evening, Professor Miles and the rest of the team. Funky Buddy, good to see you. Very good. Adi, let's go. Okay, we're here. Evening, Miles and CMF. Jason, good to see you. How you doing? Good evening, Miles and CMF. The market seems gloomy. Yep. How's today been, Miles and CMF? Lena's been good. How you been? If the Dems lost the elections, how come they have so much say in what happens in the US? The Dems, yes, they lost the election, but we still need a certain amount of votes to pass through, essentially, to end this government shutdown. And so far, we've had 13 votes, and every single time the Democrats don't want to give in. Yet the Democrats will do protesting and say, we stand with the American people. Well, the longer you don't vote, the longer we have a government shutdown, the more Americans, essentially working Americans, will lose their jobs. So I don't really know how the Democrats stand with the American people, yet a lot of Americans are losing their jobs because they just won't vote. Could you... No. Hi, Miles. Why always dipping in crypto? Johnny, give it some time. It's Evening, Miles and Crypto Peeps. Semper, good to see you. How you doing? How you been? Hi, Miles. Paul, good to see you. How you doing? Interest rate cuts put the word crunch on my portfolio. Hi, Miles and CMF. Peg, good to see you. How you doing? Do you value Jake Slater's views? I don't know who that is. Miles, why is there so much manipulation in the markets? Because all I ever hear is so much bullish news, yet we are still going downwards due to regulations. You see, when a market space doesn't have the regulations it needs, it's easy for manipulation to exist, a lot of manipulation to exist. The faster we go into regulations, the more difficult it's going to get to manipulate the markets. Because yes, manipulation will still be there, but not at this massive, large scale. Because we don't have utility inside the crypto space, and it's just buy, sell, buy, sell, buy, sell, it's easy to create manipulation. Yet, if we have regulations and utility inside the market space, and there are certain projects that are, actively, based on their utility or being used in the company and institutions that are using them, or the banks that are using, or the governments that are using, pension funds that are using, and so on, then that's a different scenario, because those projects, it will be difficult to manipulate them. They can still be manipulated, but it'll be more difficult to manipulate them because they're not just relying on buy sells and essentially future contracts. They're mostly relying on their utility now. But again, because we don't have regulations, we're not going to be having utility, which means it's easier to manipulate the market space. It's the Wild West. We need a Clarity Act, and we were about to get it. And then instead, we got a government shutdown because we couldn't get the right amount of votes in. I just keep selling my tokens just to make ends meet. That's not good. Let's talk about the gold crown that South Korea essentially gifted President Trump. Yes, he received a gold crown, which has a story behind it as well. Some historical story behind it. It's good, should take in some profits. It's not profits, it's bloody losses. When is Trump getting a Nobel Peace Prize? By the looks of it, I don't know. I don't think he is. There's a lot of people against him. Good evening, Miles and CMF. How are you doing today? So I'm doing great, Carlos. Good to see you. How you doing? Let's also talk about Uphold launching their Borrow Against Crypto program in December, starting in Florida. And the idea of essentially Uphold launching a service regarding borrowing or lending services, I think is great, to be fairly honest. They are very essentially heavily licensed. So it is a platform if anybody ever wants to look into regarding borrowing or lending services. It's definitely one platform to look into. They are very heavily regulated. Every time it dips hard, but obviously remember regarding borrowing against your crypto assets, if you don't pay back essentially what you borrowed, then the collateral that you put down with your crypto assets, you will lose. So something to always remember about. But it's great that Uphold is doing this. And as we go along, more players will start offering these types of services as well. HSBC essentially already offers it in Hong Kong, but they'll offer it on a much more wider scale. Standard Chartered Bank also offers this essentially in Hong Kong and in Dubai, but they're expanding further on. Again, it's just due to regulations. Miles, how come other ETFs are getting approved, yet XRP is getting delayed? Other ETFs haven't been approved in any sort of way. No ETFs have been approved. The only ETFs that have been approved essentially are the ones that didn't have to go through the SEC in any sort of a way. It was just essentially what the way opposite essentially did it. No ETFs have been approved in any sort of way. The ETFs that need to be approved through the SEC, none of them have been approved yet. Every time it dips hard, I have no, and I know people are saying on X, essentially Solana ETFs have been approved, or Litecoin ETFs have been approved, or Chainlink, or Dogecoin, or whatever. They're all lying out their teeth. There's no ETFs that have passed in any sort of a way. The only ETFs that have passed is through essentially, not through the SEC, but through essentially opposite, like the same way that they did the XRP ETF or the Solana ETF. I mean, XRP ETF and Dogecoin ETF, essentially that one was passed because that never needs to go through the SEC in the first place. But the ones that need to go through, none of them have passed in any sort of way because the SEC is understaffed. So if there are people on X telling people that essentially some ETFs are being passed during the government shutdown, they're completely lying. Sorry to hear, essentially. Every time it dips hard, I have no cash to buy. Don't worry. Hi, Miles and CMF. Stormy, good to see you as well. How you doing? Every month it dips. Instead of buying, I have to sell. What a disaster. I feel bad, but I don't have a choice. I'm sorry to hear that, Funky. Miles is 22,000 XRP, good amount now to hold. And what can I do with this and borrow against it and make money from speaking? Is 22,000 amount essentially good to have an XRP? Is a great amount to have. In terms of staking, that's completely up to you. You could go for locked staking, which is quite risky because in times that you might need the money, you can't get it out because it's locked. Flexible staking gives you not that much in returns, but it is flexible. You can take it out whenever you want. Again, not this financial advice in any sort of a way. The Republicans have the House, the Senate, they have the majority power. The Democrats' votes don't even matter. Incorrect. Yes, the Republicans do have the House. Yes, they do have the Senate. Yes, they have the popular vote. They have the majority. They have everything. But they still need a certain amount of votes to pass this government shutdown, essentially for it to be able to print more. And they don't still have the numbers that they need to pass. If essentially the numbers were there, they would be opening their doors. That's just how the law works. I know on CNN, ABC News, The View, and all these news channels, essentially they'll be telling people the Republicans have everything. We don't know why they're not opening their doors. Because by law, you need a certain amount of votes, and they don't have those votes. They need about 5 to 6 more votes essentially from Democratic side to open their doors. They've voted 13 times so far, and even Democrats, some Democrats are getting essentially frustrated that they're still standing and not essentially voting. You still need a certain amount of votes. Republicans do have the majority, but you still need a certain amount of votes to pass through. All the Republicans have pretty much voted to open, except one person from the Republican side, and the Democrats are pretty much all standing together. XRP is not getting an ETF. Who said that? There are no ETFs passed whatsoever due to a government shutdown. Essentially, the SEC is understaffed. The CFTC is understaffed, so is the FDIC, so is the OCC, and the list just goes on. A lot of people are losing their jobs because this government shutdown. All these government organizations are very understaffed. They can only pass anything that's in the case of emergency. XRP ETFs, Solana ETFs, Dogecoin ETFs, Chainlink ETFs, HBAR ETFs, AVAX ETFs, the list goes on. All of these ETFs are halted right now because the SEC is understaffed. So it's not that they're not being passed, it's just they're understaffed. Do you think BTC will pump before November? Well, we're about to go into November. It's the 31st, essentially, tomorrow. So we do need to come out of a government shutdown. It is holding the entire market back right now because we don't have the regulations, which is the Clarity Act. We don't have the SEC passing ETFs. We don't have the OCC response from the bank charters that essentially Ripple, Paxos, Circle applied for. There's a lot of situations going around. Do you think we're going to break the last shutdown record? The last shutdown record was 35 days. Probably, by the looks of it. We are coming up to 30 days, if I'm not mistaken. How has today been, Miles, at CMF? Lena, it's been good. How's it been with you? Mid-November. Do I think mid-November, essentially? Yes, we come out of a government shutdown. Yes, mid-November, we'll see it essentially bouncing back up. No problem. Because there is still faith back to the markets. You see, cryptocurrencies are riskier, essentially are risk assets in general. During a government shutdown and during turbulence, essentially, and during the amount of manipulation, they just become much more of a riskier asset. And I know Bitcoin has always been, titled the safe haven digital gold. In reality, it doesn't play that role when it's needed the most. So they're just seen as a much more riskier asset, even though they are risk assets in general during this entire scenario. Happy Pisces, good to see you. How you doing? So it's possible. Yes, we come out of a government shutdown. Anything's possible. Now, Nordbank is what we're going to talk about next on tonight's live. Happy Pisces, good to see you. How you doing? Nordbank to enable Bitcoin ETP trading essentially in 2025. Institutions, banks, governments, they're all still interested in cryptocurrencies. And a lot of things are still being discussed behind the scenes with the Republicans, with the Democrats, with the Senate, essentially, and with the Fed regarding cryptocurrency regulations, which is great. Nordbank, essentially with assets totaling 648 billion euros, plans to enable a Bitcoin-linked ETP trading, essentially starting December 2025. Listed by CoinShares, essentially in line with the upcoming EU MiC regulations. This shift highlights increasing regulatory clarity and evolving institutional, essentially cryptocurrency acceptance in Europe, potentially influencing broader market dynamics also. Nordbank, holding essentially assets of 648 billion, plans to start these offerings of trading of a synthetic, essentially Bitcoin ETP. On that method, essentially, the main entities involved in initiatives are Nordbank and CoinShares International Limited, with the latter being essentially manufacturer of the ETP. Nord's official statement emphasizes adaptation due to essentially the market maturation and customer essentially demands, and this is what Nordbank had to say. As the market has now matured inside the crypto space, even though we're at this stage of pure volatility and pure manipulation inside the market space, Nordbank sees it otherwise. They're saying as the market has now essentially matured, Nordbank essentially decided to provide its customers with opportunities to trade crypto-related products developed by external parties via the bank's channels. The move essentially will provide Nordbank's clients execution-only access to this regulated product. The change essentially doesn't indicate a direct BTC stake by Nord, but it reflects the bank's broadened essentially crypto strategies linked to a regulated environment. Europe's regulatory landscape under MiC supports this transition. Nord's decision essentially shows an increased institutional interest in cryptocurrencies. The strategic essentially move is likely to influence influence market participants by reportedly essentially increasing demand for BTC. Historical data shows also that the ETP launches often lead to upticks in asset interest and trading volumes, although a synthetic essential nature of an ETP means no direct on-chain changes are expected immediately, but just speculative based on the news that is positive. Nord's future essentially participation in the digital asset markets, particularly in Bitcoin-linked financial products, demonstrates a growing recognition of cryptocurrencies and mainstream finance, even during times like this. Visited by regulatory essential clarity and customer interest, a positive market reception could inspire similar moves from other institutional entities in the region, which is true. Now, the European Central Bank also did their data reports on their rate cut essentially decisions as well, as we just had the Fed's, Jerome Powell coming out wrecking the entire market space. The European Central Bank maintains deposit rates at 2% aimed market stability. The European Central Bank maintained the deposit facility rate at 2% today, coming out essentially mirroring market expectations, along with unchanged main essential refinancing and marginal lending essentially rates. This decision suggests a caution approach, essentially potentially stabilizing institutional market sentiments and euro-dominated essentially crypto trading volumes, while broader crypto market reactions remain completely neutral. The European Central Bank's governing council, led by President Christian Lagarde, has opted to maintain the deposit facility essentially rate at 2% and essentially main refinancing rate at 2.15% and the marginal essentially lending rate at 2.40%. This marks the third consecutive meeting without a rate change, as detailed essentially European Central Bank website. Immediate implementations on this decision also include essentially the reinforcements of the stability in euro-dominated essentially markets and financial systems. Institutional essentially investors are likely to perceive this as a signal of continued caution, optimism from the European Central Bank. Market reactions have been pretty much minimal, with the no major essentially movements reported in crypto trading volumes. Leading essentially figures in the crypto community, including key opinion leaders like CZ and Vitalik, essentially have not publicly commented on this decision as of yet. Insights from essentially Kunkun research team suggest that while the European Central Bank rate decision aligns with the expectations, its consistent essentially monetary stance continues to ensure stability in the European crypto markets. In the coming months, the market observers will focus on the European Central Bank's monetary policy essentially approaches and their effects on crypto trading. So the European Central Bank also came out, and they're essentially, their announcement was there's still no change inside the market space. So they're not showing the idea of having rate cuts, although the European Central Bank has done multiple rate cuts so far this year compared to essentially the Fed. But they're coming out with no change as well. So it doesn't have a bad impact on the market space, neither a good one, to be fairly honest as well. More like neutral. Now, JP Morgan is what we're going to talk about next on tonight's slide. But before we talk about JP Morgan, let's go inside the comment section first. As I said previously, multiple times, this is live, which means if you do have any questions, put it down inside the comment section. So let's see what's happening inside the comments, and then go straight into the JP Morgan news. Even Miles, the CMF, please give us some hope and motivation, because all what I feel is depression and guilt for what I have done with my money. Tor, do not feel upset in any sort of a way. Long time ago, I said to everyone, the last step before everything works out is frustration. The last step everybody's going to go through before everything starts working out is frustration. You, all of us, the moment we pass this government shutdown situation where everything's halted, we're going to go straight into the regulation stage, straight into the ETF stage, straight into the essentially utility stage. And on a global basis as well, more countries will be getting involved, more banks will be getting involved, more pension funds will be getting involved. The stock market, let's not forget the Nasdaq is going to also tokenize the stock market as well. The S&P 500 is going to tokenize the market as well. We have bank charter licenses happening for crypto companies. There's so much to happen. It's just that we're stuck in a period of pure frustration and pure manipulation right now due to a government shutdown. And during this government shutdown, it's not like they're not doing anything for the crypto space out there. They're having discussions regarding the Clarity Act, which is very, very important. They're not waiting for the government shutdown to end and then start conversations on the Clarity Act and hopefully pass it somewhere down the road. They're having active conversations about the crypto space as we're in a government shutdown, as the market's being manipulated from one side to go completely all over the place. On the other side of the spectrum, they're having discussions with the Fed, the Senate, the Republicans, the Democrats about cryptocurrencies, about what to do next, how to bring more innovation inside the United States. But you don't see any of this because everybody's too focused on price points. Let's not forget why you're holding these assets in the first place. The majority of people watching this live show, if I had to guess, are not day traders. The minority might be day traders, but the majority of you are not day traders, which means you're long-term holders. And the first reason, essentially, why you got involved in the crypto projects that you're holding, let's just say in this reference XRP, or essentially XRP Ledger or Ripple or so on, is because you know what they're going to bring to the table. Nothing has changed in any sort of a way. Ripple still has those contracts in place. Ripple is still buying essentially companies for $2 to $1 billion, essentially acquisitions they've made. Ripple still has applied for a bank charter license. They still have those contracts. They still have those licensings. They're still expanding in the banking sector. Nothing's changed in any sort of way. In fact, it's actually expanded even further inside the financial sector. Ripple has. So has essentially Stellar. HBAR's done tremendously well. Nothing has changed on HBAR's perspective either. Nothing's changed on AVAX's essential perspective. Nothing's changed on XT's. Nothing has changed, except these essential crypto projects have expanded even further. So if you're a long-term holder, you shouldn't be worried in any sort of way. However, I understand if you have bills to pay. It's completely understandable. If you have bills to pay, yes, fair enough. It is quite frustrating that it isn't moving at the rate it should be moving. But that is the game. It's manipulation. It's not easy. If it were easy, everybody would become millionaires overnight. The reason why they won't do that is so that people essentially will jump out, and some will become millionaires. Essentially, some will become incredibly wealthy down the line. Again, not overnight, but some will do incredibly well in life during this essentially frustration period, and some won't. Now, if you're the reason that you won't, and it's because you have bills, that's fair enough. That's incredibly understandable. If you have bills to pay, you have mortgages to pay, loans to pay, car payments to pay, grocery payments to pay, yes, fair enough. However, on the other side of the spectrum, if you don't have that many bills to pay, essentially, and you can survive inside the market space, but you're panicking because of what's happening right now in terms of price action, you're not a day trader. Price action should not worry you in any sort of way. You're a long-term holder. If you're a long-term holder, you look at contracts, you look at licensings, you look at how they're going to be expanding in that specific category. So XRP with finance category, another project will be Web3 category, another project will be so on and so on. So if you're not a day trader, it shouldn't worry you regarding price action in any sort of a way. If you're a long-term holder, nothing's changed. Those contracts are still there, those licenses are still there, and those filings for those ETFs and the bank charter licenses are still there. And once we come out of a government shutdown, we're good to go. Nothing has changed. If, for example, those crypto projects lost their licensings, lost their contracts, lost everything, sure, panic if you really want to, or pull your positions. But the fact that those contracts are still in place, those licenses are still in place, those regulations are coming, those ETFs are coming, those essentially bank charter licenses are coming, what's there to worry about? If they lost everything, fair enough, but they haven't. So you don't need to panic in any sort of a way. But again, if you have bills to pay, I completely understand. If you have bills to pay, I completely understand. But if you don't, and you only have some bills, or you don't have any bills to pay, and you're a long-term holder, you shouldn't be panicking in any sort of way, because those positions are still there. Now, I hope I wasn't harsh in any sort of way to everyone. If I was, I am sorry, but it's just, you need to understand, you cannot let frustration get to you in any sort of a way. I said this 3 years ago. I said the last step before everything falls into plan is going to be frustration. I said they will put you through hell, and then you come out the other side. Because while those ETF outflows are happening, with all these, some of these institutions essentially taking out essentially, their monies, their outflows and so on, more institutions are expanding inside the crypto sector. More governments are thinking about creating crypto treasuries. There's so much happening on the financial side, on the institutional side, on the banking side, the government side. Yet people are stuck looking at price action. Don't look at price action. You're in it for the long haul, not just until next week. Now, but you need to understand, that's how it is. And I want the best for all of you. That is the whole reason why I started doing these live shows. I want the best for everyone. And that's why I don't charge a single penny either, because I'm not doing it for the money. I'm doing it just so that everybody alongside me could do better in life. That's why I'm completely free of source, because I care. And I'm telling you, you should not be letting frustration get to you. I know how the game is played. I know how manipulation is played. And that's exactly what they're playing right now. Because we're in the Wild West, manipulation rules. Evening, Miles. Susie, let's go. Good to see you. How you doing? So talk, I fully understand. But you can survive this. Hello, Miles and family. All of you can. Hello, Miles and family. How is everyone doing today? Scott, good to see how you're doing. Good. What are your thoughts on R3 Corridor? It's still a good project. Really sad news. People have to sell for ends to meet. I feel so bad. Has to sell. I hope is worth holding. So honestly, I do understand if you are selling positions because you're trying to make ends meet. It's very understandable. But if you can hold your positions, you will be coming out of the other side in a much more better position. Hi, Miles and family. Good to see you as well. How you doing, Alex? I understand everyone's situation, respected too, and I fully respect. Honestly, I fully respect. Everybody's situation, everybody's position. I have been there and done it before. Now I will be satisfied with waiting to be a millionaire. Let's go, Scott. Hello, YouTube family of Miles. Let's go, Scott. I'm lucky. I live in my mom's basement and eat pack noodles. Only issue is my mom says I'm useless on these things. Johnny, don't worry about it. Tap the screen. It's therapeutic. Let's go. Like and repost, guys. Let's go, Joe. Just out of curiosity, everybody put inside the comment section if where you stand. Just out of curiosity. Miles, I've just been selling my Ethereum and BTC, but I would never sell my XRP and XLM and HBAR. Fair enough, Funky Brother. Thank you, Funky Brother. Thanks, Funky Brother. You are a good soul. Yeah. If you want to share, where you're sitting at right now, in terms of how you feel about the market space. Now, JP Morgan. This is what's happening on the institutional side, and this is how you know where the market is headed. JP Morgan tokenizes private equity using its own blockchain. JP Morgan Chase has entered the world of real-world asset tokenization by digitalizing private equity funds on its essentially blockchain network. This initiative essentially is targeting the bank's private essentially banking clients currently. It essentially offers investors early access to this new and streamlined method of investments. This move is not essentially an isolated experiment, but rather essentially a prelude to a larger digital overhaul. The rollout of the platform Kinix Fund Flow is expected to launch in full by 2026. The platform essentially is designed to convert ownership stakes in these essentially liquid assets into digital tokens. This works as a step essentially towards integrating distributed ledger technology and essentially in the traditional financial sector. This move essentially is not isolated experiment, but rather a continuation to a larger digital overhaul. JP Morgan has confirmed aggressive plans to expand its tokenization scope to include more complex alternative assets such as hedge funds, private credit, and real estate. The main goal essentially of the platform is to improve the efficiencies of fund administration and transaction settlements by tokenizing funds. JP Morgan anticipates it can reduce costs associated with managing these complex investments and enable transactions to settle faster, moving from a process that can take weeks down to potentially near essentially weeks to months, essentially in terms of settlements. It also aims to enhance liquidity and potentially open up alternative investments to widen the range of high net worth investors through essentially fractionalization. The platform will also initially focus on alternative investments before potentially expanding to other asset classes. Anton, essentially head of global alternative investment solutions at JP Morgan Asset Management, said it's more about simplifying the ecosystem of alternatives and making it, frankly, a little easier to access for most investors. The initiative marks the first live use of Kinex's platform, a JP Morgan essentially built blockchain network designed to connect issuers, investors, and fund administrators on unified digital ledgers. By leveraging distributed ledger technology, the bank intends to increase transparency automation in the $13 trillion private market industry. Highly focused on essentially a private equity vehicle, JP Morgan said essentially it plans to extend the platform to other alternative asset classes such as the private credit, hedge funds, and also essential real estate. The firm expects a broader rollout in 2026, steady integration of blockchain infrastructure into the traditional finance essentially space. The push into real-world asset tokenization is closely linked to JP Morgan's advancements in programmable finance. The bank has already introduced program percentage payments via the JP Morgan coin system, enabling the automation execution of transactions based on present rules-based logic. And this feature also essentially is a part of the bank's Onyx blockchain business unit. It shows JPM Coin's capabilities of eliminating the need for manual checks. JP Morgan also recorded $1 billion in daily transactions volume, essentially in JPM Coin. This earlier success provides a base for the broader launch in 2026. JP Morgan has been working actively in this technology, including the successful tokenization of a private equity fund on its own proprietary essentially blockchain. This development shows acceptance among major financial institutions that blockchain technology can potentially change how investment assets are owned and traded in the future. On one side of the spectrum, some essentially people inside the retail section might be getting frustrated, jump out. On the other side of the spectrum, institutions are expanding even further inside the crypto space. It tells you where this market space is about to go. Now, before we go through the next news on tonight's live, let's go inside the comment section based on the question that I asked, essentially everyone, of where does everybody stand? So let's see. Not selling my XRP, XRM, everything else is fair game. Fair enough. Frustrating is where Funky Brother standing. Oh, not selling my XDC either. Let's go, Scott. Kerry says, I stand on the ground. Let's go, Kerry. Jason says, so frustrated right now, so I know it will be soon. Thoughts on XDC? Good project. Park, $, and I don't think about touching it. Fair enough, Susie. Let's go. Good things come to those who wait. I have faith we will be blessed someday soon. Let's go, Comatose. Miles, I have big dreams, so therefore I will wait for as long as it takes to become multimillionaire. Let's go, Funky. Personally, I'm not worried at all, and I know we are closer than ever. My father, on the other hand, is so worried that he's starting to get to me. Fair enough, essentially. Come on, I don't plan to sell any of my crypto. Let's go, Stormy. I have XRP, only I have sold my card to buy this now. I'm running a cycle. Don't worry, you'll survive. I know, essentially, I know go days without looking at prices. When the time is right and everything lines up, there will be no stopping our crypto from going to the moon. Let's go, Joe. Standing in the kitchen right now. Let's go, C3. Now, Indonesia. Again, one side of the spectrum, everybody's looking at price. The other side of the spectrum, countries are expanding inside the crypto sector. Indonesia plans a digital rupiah, essentially backed by government bonds. Bank of Indonesia plans to launch its own digital currency by backing it with tokenized government bonds, enhancing the nation's financial infrastructure. This is essentially how we're expanding so fast inside the crypto sector, not shown essentially on the charts, but shown on the other side of the spectrum. This initiative aims to create a national stablecoin and improve monetary operations and transaction security. Indonesia's central bank aims to modernize monetary operations, backing its essentially proposed digital rupiah with tokenized essentially government bonds, impacting essentially national and potentially international markets also. Bank of Indonesia, essentially led by Governor essentially Perry, announced the launch of a digital essentially stablecoin. This currency aims to modernize Indonesia's financial infrastructure. It introduces the digital essentially currency as a national stablecoin. Perry, essentially emphasizing transaction security and regulatory compliance, spearheads this initiative. The Financial Services Authority monitors compliance, focusing on anti-money laundering essentially standards. This also essentially action marks significant moves within Indonesia's financial sector. Indonesia's strategy to launch the digital essentially stablecoin backed by government bonds will essentially optimize our monetary operations, fortify transaction security, and ensure regulatory essentially compliance, said Perry, the governor of essentially of Bank of Indonesia. The introduction essentially of digital stablecoins may impact the local crypto markets, particularly cross-border transactions involving stablecoins. Changes are anticipated at total value locked for DeFi protocols linked to IDR also. And financially, the digital essentially stablecoin is tied to sovereign debt instruments, yet no funding amounts or institutional allocations have been disclosed yet. The unique structure likens to bond-backed stablecoins rather than fiat-pegged currencies. Insights also suggest the move may streamline essentially monetary policy and enhance digital payment systems. Indonesia's approach could influence how digital currencies are adopted in other regions, leveraging essentially backed models. Again, these are countries expanding inside the crypto sector. In times like this, where the market seems doomed and gloomed, in times like this, countries are thinking about, Now it's a great time to get involved inside the crypto space. While people inside the crypto space might be feeling frustrated, and some may even feel like jumping out completely. Whereas countries are getting involved inside the crypto space even further and thinking about now it's a great time to get involved. Just think about that one. Standard Chartered says tokenized real-world assets can reach $2 trillion by 2028. Standard Chartered came out with a new perspective today. Standard Chartered has said essentially tokenized real-world assets may reach $2 trillion by 2028. It linked to the growth to the wider use of blockchain rails, stablecoins, and DeFi essentially for payments and investments. It said more assets from traditional finance can move to tokenization when the rails have enough liquidity. Investment bank Standard Chartered says decentralized finance is emerging as a powerful alternative to traditional essentially finance, which relies on centralized systems run by essentially trusted authorities like central banks. The bank essentially forecasted that by the end of 2028, non-stablecoin tokenized assets will reach the market capitalization of $2 trillion also, up from essentially $35 billion today, matching the expected essentially size of the stablecoin market space. Tokenized money market funds and listed equities could account for roughly $750 billion, with funds and private equities, essentially commodities, corporate debt, and real estate marking up the remainder, the bank said essentially in the Thursday reports. DeFi built on blockchain technology removes the need for centralized authority and instead operates on transparency, accessibility, and code-based trust, wrote essentially Jeff Kendrick, the head of digital assets at Standard Chartered Bank. And according to essentially Jeff, the 2025 boom in stablecoins has accelerated DeFi's shift from a niche crypto-native activity to a mainstream financial force. This is essentially what Standard Chartered Bank is saying, that we've moved away from a niche perspective market spaces of the crypto sector to a mature crypto sector. Again, this is Standard Chartered Bank saying this, and this is the head of research. The widespread use of stablecoins has increased awareness in development markets and injected on-chain liquidity that fuels further DeFi innovation, particularly in lending and borrowing, the report said. Stablecoins are cryptocurrencies, so their values are yield and pegged, as everybody knows. Standard Chartered sees this as the start of self-reinforcing cycles. Liquidity creates new products, which in essentially turn attracts more liquidity. And the main risk, the report noted, is essentially if the United States fails to deliver regulatory clarity before 2026 midterms and elections, though essentially it is not its base case. So while essentially some, again, from the retail section might be feeling that frustration stage, other side of the spectrum, banks are expanding even more, institutions are expanding even more. Standard Chartered Bank is coming out with reports that the crypto space went from a niche market space to essentially a mature market space. That tells you a lot. Ondo Finance taps Chainlink. Ondo Finance named Chainlink as the official or collateral provider for its tokenized stocks and essentially ETFs, aiming to improve how financial data moves across blockchain networks. Chainlink will supply custom price feeds for essentially more than 100 tokenized equities on Ondo's platform, including US-listed stocks and ETFs. Ondo's tokenized equities now essentially spans to 10 blockchains and represents over $320 million. The data also includes essentially corporate actions like essentially divided payments, and it's intended to help keep valuations accurate across the various blockchains where these assets also essentially are expanded to BNB essentially chain, broadening access to particularly in Asia and Latin America where BNB has large user bases. These assets are aimed at non-US essentially investors who want exposure to US markets and face restrictions and essentially assessing traditional brokerage services. The two companies plan to leverage Chainlink's cross-chain interoperability protocol, CCIP, as a standard for institutions moving essentially tokenized assets between blockchains. CCIP is already being tested by traditional finance firms, including interbank messaging service standards, SWIFT, DTCC, which essentially provides clearing settlements and trade essential reporting for similar use cases also. The agreement is a part of a broader collaboration. Chainlink is joining the Ondo essentially Global Market Alliance, a group of firms supporting the adoption of tokenized stocks on chain. In parallel, Ondo will join Chainlink's Corporate Actions Initiative, which includes 24 financial institutions such as SWIFT and DTCC and Euroclear, focused on bringing markets and infrastructure onto blockchain rails. Chainlink does do pretty well when it comes to essentially data. So it's a given that Ondo decided to go with Chainlink regarding data. Now, moving on essentially off that and going into the Ripple and XRP news. Also, by the way, are people having issues on YouTube or on X watching this live show? Because it seems to be freezing. Shelly says having issues with connections on YouTube but not on X. Okay, so it's connections happening on YouTube. Just moved over to X as YouTube is freezing. Okay, so if you are having essentially issues watching this live show right now and it is freezing, move over to X. YouTube seems to be freezing out. I've seen this video on Instagram. Manny says, good evening, Miles and CMF. Good to see you, Manny. How you doing? It's all part of the game. Facts. How can I be safe from CBDCs, the Antichrist, as he comes soon after New Solomon Temple meetings? Johnny, don't think about that. Good ideas. Sometimes I go 24 hours. I see videos on Instagram. Frozen. Hello, Miles. What's happening to the live? As time has passed, I'm thinking more and more that Gary and Brad were in courts with each other, as Ripple wasn't ready with not enough infrastructure back then. No, Gary essentially, Brad and essentially, you mean Gary Gensler was stalling essentially Ripple due to not having infrastructure built. It always has been one outcome, but the other outcome was that the banks were essentially weaponizing essentially the SEC to go against Ripple, which made Ripple expand overseas. Just moved over to X, having issues with YouTube, but not on X. All good now. X is fine. Back on YouTube now. It's okay. Okay, thank you for that, Shelly, and thank you for that, JP as well, and thank you for that comatose. Let's go, Carlos. But now okay for me. Okay, YouTube is not lagging anymore. That's good. Now, moving on to the Ripple and XRP news on tonight's live. SEC filing essentially sets November launch for a Canary XRP ETF. Again, the SEC is obviously understaffed due to the government shutdown. Yet, Canary Capital Group LLC has filed with the SEC for a potential XRP essentially ETF launch in November 2025, following the removal of their previous delay causes from their essentially application. The filing could significantly increase essentially institutional interest in XRP, similar to impacts that it has in the past on the other two ETFs. The Canary XRP ETF filing with the SEC suggests a potential November 2025 launch. Canary Capital Group LLC heads the ETF initiative with Stephen essentially McGraw as the main essentially contact. The firm's background includes significant experience in asset management. No direct statements have been released on social media regarding Canary Capital XRP ETF filing. The potential ETF launch could significantly affect XRP markets and liquidity, industry consensus, projects, institutional inflows if approved. The official documents essentially detail the structural focus, yet community reaction remains largely speculative. The initiative financial implications point to substantial market movements, with projections extending essentially up to $8 billion in inflows. The traditional markets also could see similar impacts to those experiences during BTC and Ethereum ETF approvals, while the community speculates on outcomes. Verified on-chain data directly essentially related to ETF remains absent. Look, regarding XRP ETFs, we've seen that XRP futures do tremendously well. I mean, they smashed milestones. So we know an XRP ETF from the bigger players, it's going to also smash records, no doubt about it in any sort of a way. But it's great, honestly amazing that Canary Capital XRP ETF filing, incredible. Yeah, cool. The SEC decides to pass essentially XRP ETFs or any other ETF essentially in this time period. They haven't passed any. If people on X are telling you the SEC's passed ETFs during this time, during this period of government shutdown, they're completely lying. Also, Ripple partners with non-profits to speed global essentially relief funds. The fintech company Ripple announced that several of the world's Water.org, Give Directly, and Mercy essentially Corps are leveraging its licensed payment solution, Ripple Payments, and its US dollar-backed stablecoin RLUSD to dramatically improve the speed, transparency, and impact of aid delivery and funding. Non-profits seek more efficient ways to mobilize funds quickly, especially when essentially responding to urgent needs and regions where limited banking infrastructure is there. Ripple essentially borders in seconds, essentially 24/7, 365, without relying on traditional banking systems. Pairing the platform with RLUSD provides highly efficient and transparent way to deliver essential relief funds. I think this is a great essentially thing that Ripple is doing for these charitable organizations. Our partners and customers are redefining how urgent aid, sustainable development, and financial support reach those who need it the most, said Monica Long, the president essentially of Ripple. It's a powerful example of what happens when innovation meets purpose, showing how blockchain technology can reshape the systems behind global relief and unlock lasting impacts at scale. For World Central Kitchen, which mobilizes swiftly during crisis, leveraging Ripple essentially and RLUSD is a game changer for speed, said these charitable organizations. So Ripple essentially has decided to start helping out essentially these charitable organizations and being essentially a backbone for them. RLUSD, I think that's perfect essentially what Ripple is doing. Very good essentially that what Ripple is bringing to the table for these charitable organizations. It does make their payments much more faster. It helps to reach, if there is some sort of world disaster and so on, obviously using RLUSD will be a lot more efficient than using essentially USD in terms of fiat. Now, YouTube has frozen again. It's not good. Now, we have come to the essentially endings of tonight's live. But I just want to remind everyone once again, because it is important for you to be having this at the back of your mind, that after this, because it's a better position for them, JP Morgan is expanding in tokenization in this time period that we're in right now, pure manipulation inside the crypto sector. After this government shutdown situation is ended, a lot of positive things are going to be happening for the crypto space. And one of the main ones being regulations, which leads to utility. Don't let anything else distract you from that essentially end goal, which is regulations, utility, and everything else that comes with it. And that's the only thing that matters. Not price action. We're not in it for these small price points. We're in it for the long haul. Nothing's changed. The plan is still the same. It's just a speed bump. And this is definitely not your stop to get out. Unless you need, essentially, because it's due to bills that you may have to cover, that's fair enough. That's completely understandable. But if it's just pure out of pure frustration, you're thinking about jumping out your positions, not good to do. Not financial advice either. This was the CMF Live Show. This was episode 396 of the CMF Live. Stands for Crypto Master Family. My name is Miles. You can tune this live Monday to Friday, 10 p.m. Long time onwards for the most recent news regarding cryptocurrencies, CBDCs, AI, politics, regulations. Vital information for you to know about regarding the world completely transforming into digital space. And a disclaimer of this live, as always, is not financial advice, not political advice, and whatever I say is only for entertainment purposes. On tonight's live, we talked about essentially Ripple's organizational, essentially, charitable donations through RLUSD. We talked about essentially Carry Capital applying for an XRP ETF. We talked about essentially Ondo Finance tapping into Chainlink for data essentially usage. We talked about Standard Chartered Bank saying the crypto markets can expand even further in terms of tokenization. We talked about Indonesia's government getting involved inside the crypto space at this moment in time with all the volatility we're having. We talked about JP Morgan essentially offering tokenization services, essentially 2026. They're preparing from now during this government situation. We also talked about the European Central Bank, no change whatsoever on their rates. We talked about Northern Bank going inside the Bitcoin sector, enable Bitcoin lending and borrowing services and moments like this. We also talked about Glassnode's report that there is definitely manipulation going on inside the crypto sector, because there can be, because we're in a no regulation type of scenario. We also talked about tonight's live regarding the China and US situation too. And as usual, we did quite a lot of essentially Q&As. But again, before we do go, let's go inside the comment section first. This is what's happening there. And then we're straight into calling it a night and tuning in tomorrow. YouTube is frozen again. Thank you very much. I'm not freezing. I'm tucked in bed listening. Let's go. Night, Miles and CMF. Pablo, see you tomorrow sometimes usual, brother. Thank you, Miles, very much for the news, and good night all. Carlos, see you tomorrow sometimes usual. Great live, Miles, as usual. Thank you, holding strong. See you tomorrow. Good night, Miles and CMF. JD, let's go. See you tomorrow sometimes usual. Night, Miles, brilliant and live as always. See you all tomorrow. Joe, see you tomorrow sometimes usual. Thanks, Miles. Have a great night and see you tomorrow same time. Let's go Autistic. See you tomorrow same time. As always, thank you, Miles. Good night, everyone. Let's go Stormy. See you tomorrow sometimes usual as well. I think the run is just going to be delayed because of the government shutdown and waiting on regulations. It may not be until late December, start of 2026, before we take off. Just be patient, guys. It will happen. We just need to wait. Facts. What's essentially Shelly has said, absolutely facts. Good night, Miles, and thank you so much. Let's go, Peg. See you tomorrow, sometimes usual as well. Share the live. Thanks, Miles, for everything. Another great live. Let's go, Scott. See you tomorrow, sometimes usual. Brother, will you please give me a call after the live? Yes, come on. I'll give you a call essentially after this live. Thanks, Miles, for your insights. Have a great day and night all. Let's go, Shelly. See you tomorrow, sometimes as usual. The institutions are trying to get rid of the retailers. I have said this often, which is facts. Good night, Miles and CMF family. Funky brother, see you tomorrow, sometimes as usual. Good night, Miles and all CMF. Thank you so much for a great live and news. Let's go, JPC tomorrow, sometimes as usual. Great job, Miles. Let's go, Scott. Share the live. Let's go. Thanks, Miles, for keeping us reassured. I know we will be set. As always, great live, brother. See you tomorrow. Comatose. Let's go. See you tomorrow, sometimes as usual. Thank you so much to everybody from the CMF that tunes in every single night, likes, retweets, and essentially comments outside the live show. Honestly, thanks so much to every single one of you. If you haven't, smash the like button, smash the retweet buttons. If you followed me during this live, welcome to the CMF. If you subscribe or follow, depending on X or YouTube. I will be seeing everybody tomorrow, same timing as usual. Everybody have a great day or a good night, depending on where you are around the world. CMF. Love you all. See you all tomorrow, same time as usual, 10 p.m. London time onwards, for the next episode of CMF Live, episode 398.